Let's see here. All right, let me do the audio check. 1 2 1 2. Audio is good. Uh, we can get into this now. Well, let's start reading. Feel free to review the descriptions for the links. Feel free to comment if you would like to have a productive conversation. The purpose of the stream is to share the articles and personal thoughts as I grow with the knowledge provided in the articles. All right, and today we will start with the headline, Dialysis Workers Fight Back Against Blood-Sucking System by Liberation Staff, October 7th, 2024. The picture is of the DaVita Respect Our Rights banner and healthcare workers protesting, I suppose. All right. Articles reads as follows. On October 3rd, workers at 37 different dialysis units across California announced their intention to go on an unfair labor practice ULP strike for 6 days from October 14th to 19th. Dialysis employees at DaVita, Fresenius, Kidney Care, Satellite Healthcare, and U.S. Renal Care started unionizing with SEIU, United Healthcare Workers, West, in December 2022, but have faced intransigence from management in their negotiations. Management at all four companies have committed countless ULPs, going so far as terminating union leaders. ULPs again stands for unfair labor practice. For profit and against patients. Dialysis stands out as a sector of the healthcare industry in need of drastic change. Dialysis caregivers provide routine care for patients with kidney failure or end-stage renal disease, ESRD, by taking their blood out of their body, cleaning it, and returning it. In the United States, there are 550,000 patients on dialysis and ESRD. Patients are uniquely eligible for Medicare, meaning payments for the vast majority of dialysis patients come through public funding. In fact, 1/4 of Medicare spending goes towards patients with kidney disease. In spite of this, the industry is incredibly privatized and monopolized. The two largest companies, DaVita and Fresenius, are both for-profit and dominate around 75% of the market share. Through their monopolization of the industry, DaVita and Fresenius make massive profits. DaVita is a Fortune 500 company that made $691 million in profit in 2023. In 2020, their CEO, Javier Rodriguez, received a $73.4 million compensation package. Fresenius is originally a German company, yet their most consistent source of profits has always been in the U.S. They made $540 million in profit in 2023. The monopolization of the industry goes beyond direct patient care. Fresenius also produces equipment, drugs, and machines that are used in the industry. In spite of all of the money these companies make, employees report regular short staffing and poverty wages. The profit-driven nature of healthcare in the U.S. is laid completely bare in dialysis, while in other fields of healthcare, money-hungry giants hide under the guise of nonprofit status. Dialysis companies are shameless. Satellite Healthcare has been one of the few remaining significant nonprofits, but employees report that it has been getting taken over by the private equity-run U.S. Renal Care since last year. Under capitalism, more profitable entities swallow up and take over less profitable entities, leading to monopolization and profits over patients' care as an inevitable result. Patients ultimately feel the impact of the of this callous system. The U.S. reports one of the worst mortality rates for dialysis patients of any industrialized nation, in spite of spending the most money per patient. The mortality rate for patients at Fresenius clinics is 17% higher, and at DaVita clinics, 24% higher than at nonprofit facilities. The former CEO of DaVita, Kent 30, once famously said, he manages dialysis clinics the same way he would if he were the CEO of Taco Bell. While corporations and CEOs make millions, patients report unsanitary and unsafe conditions, such as blood from a past patient still being on their chair, cockroaches and other insects, and being rushed out while they are still dizzy and recovering. As frontline caregivers, the employees are paid to see such conditions for their patients, but understaffing and company policies leave them with little choice or power. Dialysis workers fight back. The decision of workers to organize in an industry where there are so few employers has been heroic. Dialysis workers first began organizing in 2016, but they were held back for many years by the industry's terror tactics of terminating union leaders. Two main factors led to workers finally winning their union in California in 2022. One was the massive surge of workers' worker activity, and particularly the Starbucks union victories. Through their organizing efforts, Starbucks workers set stronger precedents with the National Labor Relations Board for workers to be able to vote in, quote, single shop elections, end quote, as opposed to being forced into regional elections. Management at companies like Starbucks and DaVita prefer regional elections because they know that they have the upper hand in such contexts. They can make sure management at each location is on message busting the union, while pro-union workers do not have the ability to talk to workers at locations other than their own, and most often do not even know who they are. The second factor that led to the organizing boom for dialysis workers was their experience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Workers often had no choice but to work in designated COVID clinics, and just as many other healthcare workers experienced, were left without proper PPE or staffing levels. The trauma that workers experienced through the pandemic exacerbated the grievances that have always existed: low pay, overwork, and understaffing. The reaction of the dialysis industry towards organizing has been nasty and severe. At Davis, Fresenius, and Satellite, prominent union leaders have been terminated. In one particular egregious example, DaVita fired the main organizer at a clinic the day before a scheduled picket to protest DaVita's actions. Other ULPs have included bad faith bargaining, discriminatory increases to non-union clinics that they withheld from union clinics, and the offer of raises and promotions for workers to vote to excuse me and the offer of raises and promotions for workers to vote no in a union election. The dialysis companies rely on a lengthy and drawn-out legal process through the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, and one of their key messages to promote futility is that it will take too long for workers to win anything, so there is no point. While the Labor Board has picked up at least one of the unfair termination cases brought forth by the union, it has been over a year since the termination has passed and the damage has been done in a tight-knit community of workers. Furthermore, even when workers do win such cases, as best they will get their job back and receive back pay. But there is no significant financial penalty for the employer. In comparison, DaVita and Fresenius have been willing to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements. Last year, 21 dialysis clinics went on strike, and since then their numbers have grown dramatically. In part, dialysis workers have been spurred on by Kaiser workers that went on the largest healthcare strike in U.S. history last year and successfully protected their free family healthcare and pension benefits. A number of the dialysis clinics that are going on strike are clinics that have not even voted on unionizing yet, but they have also committed to striking due to the character of the industry's wide fight. But they have also committed to striking due to the character of the industry-wide fight. The implications of dialysis workers winning big in California go beyond the Golden State and go beyond dialysis. Dialysis represents two different trends: the privatization of healthcare and the disaggregation of the worksite. Many unionists have long held the effective labor organizing only happens in densely congregated work sites like a factory. But as more and more jobs shift to the service sector, many workers work in offices, stores, and clinics of a few dozen employees. In healthcare, job growth is in outpatient settings are set to far outpace growth in the hospitals over a 10-year period. The United Campaign of Starbucks Workers has shown that it is possible for workers to win in new contexts and environments, and dialysis workers are showing that it is also possible in the work of saving and extending life. This just goes to show again how the capitalist structure, the ruling class, is always structured to protect the industry, the companies, um, over the workers. Uh, a big example of that is how the companies might be forced to do back pay for the workers that have been fired intentionally to break up strikes and to pay them, but the company doesn't suffer consequences, penalties for the hardship it created, or for the hardship it created to the whole staff or to all the workers by siphoning or stealing their labor, practically wage theft, right? This is why a community is important. This is why, in the age of so much technology and social media, it is important to utilize these tools to organize, to educate, organize, and mobilize. Um, and just think about how the CEOs are making so much money here, um, as stated in these numbers, right? They made a $540 million in profit in 2023. Uh, in 2020, their CEO, Javier Rodriguez, received a $73.4 million compensation package. Who the hell needs $74 million? Uh, this this is rewarding ghoulishness, literally. Uh, and this is what capitalism does. DaVita is a Fortune 500 company that made $691 million in profits. And profits, that's net profits. That's money redistributed to the 1% only. But they couldn't pay their workers. I mean, it's absurd. It's disgusting. It's totally disgusting what capitalism in the Western Empire uh, does uh, to its own people. Now this is what it does for profit to the working class in the nation, to the patients, to the workers. It doesn't even care about your life. Just think about what they do to exploit exterior resources, external resources, international resources. Um, it's disgusting. This is why, as someone that studies virtue, socialism, egalitarianism, I support a universal healthcare system that is a non-profit system. If healthcare is a human right, then it shouldn't be a for-profit motive. And if it is going to be a for-profit motive, there should be caps on profits uh, to keep it going. Trust me, giving them a 10% cap on $690 million, what's that? So they're taking home in profits $100 million. Nobody, I mean, nobody, it justifies paying nobody $73 million in compensation when they're already making millions of dollars a year. I mean, just to play devil's advocate, let's just say we cap everyone's income, CEOs like the upper 1%, to 1 million a year. That's still a lot of money, you know. And but here in the empire, in the belly of the beast, we are paying CEOs, we are paying propagandists within the millions of dollars, and they expect to people, and they say that a living wage is $15 an hour. or that a poverty wage is if you make less than $17,000 a year. Like, this is disgusting. Like, the working class needs to wake up, needs to unite, and needs to organize to have a better humanity, and stop simping for these billionaire ghouls. It is mind-boggling how I see so many working class with the boot on their neck, totally struggling, still simping for this capitalist agenda that is just a total profit and wealth redistribution to the 1%, whether they deserve it or not. And no, they don't deserve it. Uh, anyways, all right, that's my thoughts on this article. I'm going to move on. Let me check the audio and educational purposes, and the educational purposes that anyone that wants to participate or read along. Audio looks good. I'm going to move on to the next article. We're just going to move along here. So it looks like we have one, two, three, four more articles to go. I'm going to try to get as not to rush it, but get through as quickly as possible. I do have somewhere to be this afternoon. A little protesting, little community action for free Palestine, which I suggest everybody get involved. Everybody do their part to bring to light this horrible issue that's happening uh, in another part of the planet, uh, practically sponsored and funded and complicit with Israel and the United States. All right, on to the next article. PSL statement: We will stay in the streets until Palestine is free. That's the headline by Party for Socialism and Liberation, October 7th, 2024. Photo is of January 13th, National March for Gaza in Washington, D.C. 1 year ago, a mass movement in solidarity with Palestine emerged in the United States that transformed the political landscape of this country. As Israel used its U.S. supplied arsenal to carry out a horrific genocide in Gaza, a war the regime has now expanded to Lebanon, and the entire region, people of conscience took to the streets in historic numbers. Biden, the architect of the genocide along with Netanyahu, could not even run for re-election in large part because of the justified hatred his policies had provoked among large sections of the population. People will never forget the scenes of death and destruction that unfolded before our very eyes. The people of the United States have seen the genocidal nature of the Israeli regime, and millions of people have developed a profound commitment to the Palestinian struggle for liberation. The emergence of new forms of communication that are less easily censored was a crucial factor that prevented the reality of the genocide from being covered up. For so long, public opinion in this country has been shaped by pro-Israel corporate media outlets and a consensus among ruling class politicians and institutions that no sympathy for Palestinians would be tolerated. But there has been a sea change in consciousness thanks to the heroism of the Palestinian people and the mass movement in the streets that students have set up encampments at universities and defied police repression and ludicrous false allegations of anti-Semitism. Major labor unions like the United Auto Workers and Association of Flight Attendants have publicly taken a stand for the first time in solidarity with Palestine. Healthcare workers, artists, journalists, educators, and workers in other fields have formed organizations to support the Palestinian cause. All these various expressions of solidarity with Palestine have converged for enormous national mobilizations and coordinated days of action. On November 4th, January 13th, June 8th, and July 24th, huge numbers of people converged in Washington, D.C. for massive actions. After the 500,000 strong November 4th mobilization, a movement to, quote, shut it down for Palestine, end quote, was born and has held dozens of days of actions to disrupt business as usual. Civil disobedience actions targeted arms manufacturers. Marches shut down highways. And pickets demanded that major corporations divest from the Israeli regime. In total, millions have been in the streets in one of the most massive anti imperialist movements in U.S. history. The U.S. Israeli onslaught continues in Palestine and Lebanon and threatens to engulf the entire Middle East. Schools, hospitals, residential neighborhoods, and places of worship have been bombarded in an attempt to make the targeted areas unlivable. The need to keep up the fight is as urgent as ever. And we should be under no illusion of a quick victory. Like the Palestinian people understand so well, the movement for liberation is a long-term fight. The Party for Socialism and Liberation joins with so many other people around the world in this commitment. We will keep up the struggle until the occupation falls and Palestine is free from the river to the sea. All right. So, um, my personal view, as stated before I read the article, is that as an egalitarian, excuse me, let me drink some tea. Darn, out of chocolate. As an egalitarian, a leftist, a Marxist, a communist, a socialist, whatever you want to call me, humanitarian, and as someone who also practices or tries to practice the best of philosophy like Stoic principles, Buddhist or Taoist principles with modern psychology, like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy. Um, we have to treat this as people that care not only of our neighbors or direct family members as human beings, but see everybody around the world as direct human beings, as our brothers, as our sisters, um, that have been born and raised in different circumstances, right? With this mindset, we always give everybody uh, the value of one. You value their lives as much as your own. This is not to say that there is no way to exact justice or to practice justice or to uh, better humanity. This is on the contrary. This is to say that we are not deterred or disturbed as much or perhaps manipulated by what we see, but that we take a critical view of what is happening and we meditate or we analyze the issues and consider what is best for humanity, right? In the regards of uh, the the slaughter of Palestinians, the genocide of Palestinians, um, we should do what is right here and consider all Palestinians as equals to ourselves because they are. They are human beings. They do not deserve to be bombarded. They do not deserve to be treated like animals or considered animals. The propaganda that paints Palestinians as subhuman and Zionists as higher beings per se, is a fascist propaganda system. This is what happened, very similar to the events of the Holocaust, and it's such a hypocrisy and such an irony that the Zionists that were embedded into the Middle East region to colonize are now using these tactics because they were unable to actually push the people of the region out. Uh, so our movement, for me, uh, is limited what we can do, right, as individuals. But as individuals, the little that we do adds up to millions of people in action in the streets. This is why we always, as leftists, as humanitarians, as egalitarians, as the left in general, we always talk about educating people, showing them the truth, uh, organizing people, teaching them how to organize, how to work together as a community, and mobilizing to actually take action to make a difference. Uh, there's little we can do uh, as individuals, but there's a lot we can do when we come together. We can vote, which is the minimal we can do, really. But we can educate, organize, and mobilize. Always important keys here. Um, Trust me, the ruling class is always de-educating, always deorganizing, and always demobilizing the working class. And as a working class, we have to fight against that and educate people. I will not mince any words here in regards to saying that uh, if you are if you're supporting Zionism, if you're supporting the Zionist candidates running like Trump or Kamala, you indirectly by proxy are being a Zionist and a fascist. Do not fall for the propaganda that you need to elect or cast your vote for either one. Trust me, they're not going to improve your life. Both parties are beholden to the ruling class and to the Zionist agenda, which is genocide of people in the Middle East. So I recommend you get some morals, you look into it more, and stand on the right side of history and reject all of it. Very well. That is the minimal you can do. Just not vote for them. The most you can do, the best things you can do is, like I said, mobilize, get on the streets, call your representatives, tell people the truth. Uh, be the black sheep, I suppose, that they all want to outcast because they don't want to hear the truth, right? They want everything to be a pretty picture for you to paint everything cute roses and rainbows and bury everything under the rug. Uh, but people with this Zionist mentality want you to agree with everything they say when you go to holiday parties or when you go to festivals or whatever. They feel like they have the liberty to speak their nonsense, but don't want you to speak the truth and actually boil over and get rabid when you do, right? That is their problem. Uh, my conscience is clear, always speaking the truth. Always tell the truth in regards to what's happening to these issues. And those people have a problem with it. You probably don't want to be involved or directly in contact with them all the time because they're not really your allies. Until you are able to pull them to the left with you, they are not really your allies. If anything, they can compromise you. So be very wary and stay educated. All right. Let's see here. Um, And another note to that, there is solidarity in working class agendas, uh, but don't forget the working class agenda, when you can pull people from the right to fight for a cause with you, doesn't mean they're necessarily trustworthy people. You have to be very vigilant, uh, uh, be very attentive of the possibilities that you may be betrayed or stabbed in the back. That's why when we say we create bridges for the right to come to the left, it doesn't mean the left goes to the right or the left joins organizers on the right. It means we allow open room for the right to join us in movements that benefit all sides of the working class under the organization of leftist people that are serious about being leftists. All right, I'm going to move along. That's my thoughts on that. Man, I had like these tiramisu chocolates. I think I'm not going to even mention the brand, but they're little balls of tiramisu chocolates, and I really like them. I try to only eat one a day. All right, carry on. Audio check 1 2 1 2. Hair check 1 2. All right, carry on. Let's see. The title here is From Bhopal to East Palestine, Corporate Greed. You know what? Let me start that title. Let me try to get the title right. From, I don't know, Bhopal to East Palestine, corporate greed, sacrifice zones, and the human cost of doing business. By Adam Barrington, October 7, 2024. The picture is of, it looks like it's some oil tanks, which are very similar to water tanks. Well, let's read along. Article it reads as follows. On September 17th, the Institute for Policy Studies hosted an event in Washington, D.C., commemorating the 1984 Union Carbide chemical disaster in Bhopal, India. The worst industrial accident in world history. The gas leak at the Union Carbide pesticide factory in Bhopal killed between 3,000 and 10,000 people in the first weeks, permanently injured hundreds of thousands, and exposed over 500,000 to highly toxic chemicals, including methyl isocyanate. The panel at the event included 3 activist survivors of the Bhopal disaster: Rana Dhingra, Bhatti Bhai Rajak, and Farhat Yahan, who were joined by Yami Wallace, the founder and executive board president of the Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment. The harrowing accounts of both tragedies delivered by the panelists revealed the parallels between the Union Carbide gas leak in Bhopal and the Norfolk Southern freight derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Both disasters resulted from egregious corporate negligence. In the case of Bhopal, there were multiple incidents in years leading up to the 1984 gas leak that killed or hospitalized workers at the Union Carbide pesticide plant. In 1982, a team of American engineering experts conducted an inspection of the Union Carbide factory. In their report, which was sent to Union Carbide's management committee, the inspectors wrote explicitly about the, quote, potential for the release of toxic materials, end quote, as well as a consequent, quote, runaway reaction, end quote, due to, quote, equipment failure, operating problems, or maintenance problems, end quote. Dhingra, Rajak, and Jahan described the horror that struck Bhopal the night of December 3, 1984, when water entered the methyl isocyanate tank. Methyl isocyanate, hydrogen cyanide, and monomethylamine. Monomethylamine. Not unlike the chemical mushroom cloud that towered over East Palestine after the derailment on February 3, 2023. People running for their lives, eyes burning in the toxic fumes, screaming, pregnant women miscarrying in the streets lined by the poisoned bodies of deceased victims. This was the scene of the crime committed against the people of Bhopal by Union Carbide, as described by the 3 survivors on the panel. Similarly, greed and corporate negligence forced the people of East Palestine to flee their homes after Norfolk Southern urged a vent and burn derailment response that, as the National Transportation Safety Board found in their investigation, was completely unnecessary. Toxic chemicals spread far beyond the site of the derailment, polluting air, soil, and water acres across 16 states and impacting an estimated, polluting air, soil, and water across 16 states and impacting an estimated 110 million people, 1/3 of the U.S. population. The rail cars carried not only vinyl chloride, but also ethyl acrylate and isobutylene, both considered extremely toxic and probably carcinogenic. Wallace described the widespread suffering and hardship experienced by the people of East Palestine and surrounding communities following the derailment. When residents were told to evacuate, the 2 hotels in the area filled up quickly. Like many other East Palestine residents, Wallace, along with her husband and daughter, had to share a hotel room with extended family. Those who could not find shelter nearby had to travel long distances to find hotels with rooms available. Norfolk Southern has been quick to highlight its supposed humanitarianism by publicizing the settlement payments the railroad corporation has agreed to give East Palestine residents. As Wallace pointed out, this is merely adding insult to injury. The payments based on proximity to the site of the wreck, and the number of people in each household hardly amount to anything, and in many cases amount to nothing at all. This is because, as Wallace explained at the IPS event, Norfolk Southern deducted the hotel bills, meals, and other day-to-day expenses East Palestine residents accrued while displaced between, excuse me, this is because, as Wallace explained at the IPS event, Norfolk Southern deducted the hotel bills, meals, and other day-to-day expenses East Palestine residents accrued while displaced because of the derailment from the settlement payments. Thus, some residents of East Palestine ended up receiving zero compensation for their suffering. Today, the soil and creek in East Palestine are still contaminated with the hazardous chemicals released from the derailment and asinine vent and burn pushed by Norfolk Southern. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources estimates nearly 40,000 minnows and 5,500 other species, small fish, crayfish, amphibians, and microinvertebrates, died as a result of the derailment. Residents of East Palestine continue to experience health problems, including headaches, nosebleeds, and other ailments from chemical exposure, while Norfolk Southern boasts about the company's commitment to cleaning up the disaster area. What the people of Bhopal and East Palestine share most of all is that they live in what corporation excuse me. What the people of Bhopal and East Palestine share most of all is that they live in what corporations consider sacrifice zones, areas populated by poor or working class people viewed as expendable, places that are wantonly offered as sacrifices as the altar of the market. To this day, Union Carbide and now Dow Chemical refuse to accept responsibility for the devastating Bhopal gas leak. Like Norfolk Southern, Union Carbide agreed to pay scraps to its victims. Many survivors of the world's worst industrial accidents received as little as $300 or less from the corporations whose negligence upended their lives. Many survivors haven't received anything at all. The tragedies in Bhopal and East Palestine were both avoidable. Union Carbide and Norfolk Southern, in the pursuit of profit, cut costs, neglected maintenance, and ignored equipment defects. The result was destruction of human lives. Whether blame is placed on a leaky valve or a faulty wheel bearing, the true culprit is corporate greed and the economic system that prioritizes profit over people. The stark and grim truth that stares us in the face is that so long as business is allowed to continue as usual, there will be more catastrophes like those that shook Bhopal and East Palestine. Indeed, an ever increasing number of communities populated by poor and working class people all over the world will find themselves cruelly designated as sacrifice zones. Though the future appears dark, it is heartening to know activists from impacted communities like Dhingra, Rajak, Jahan, and Wallace continue to fight and raise the voices of people whose lives were ravaged by Union Carbide and Norfolk Southern. The International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal and the Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment should be commended, The International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal and the Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment should be commended for their efforts, as they inspire hunger for justice and a fighting spirit in everyone, from Bhopal to East Palestine, demanding a more human world. Featured photo is deteriorating section of the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal taken in 2008. Again, the major focus on these articles is always that the issue here is capitalism, the for-profit systems that give no consideration to the working class, right? And even when they are caught doing something horrible, or something going wrong horribly, the people in charge are not made accountable. The corporation is not seriously made accountable. The government, the ruling class, our politicians only find them with mere scraps, a mere fraction to give to people. What is $300 going to do for you if you develop lung cancer, or if you lost your home because you had to move and you couldn't pay the mortgage and you couldn't get the job done to pay the mortgage, right? Uh, the these corporations, what we have here is a kleptocracy. What we have here is a plutocracy, where the ruling class, the rich, are the ones in control of the government, and not the government in control of the rich. Uh, if it were the other way around, companies like these uh, would be fully dissolved, fully liquidated. Norfolk Southern would be totally absorbed as at least a co-op, perhaps as a government socialized system, a company, right? Uh, or hand it over to somebody with stricter laws to update and make it a functioning system, not just focused on profit, but on the health and safety of the people, of the working class. Let's keep in mind that we do have nations that not only hold their corporations accountable, like China, but some nations even go to an extent of giving these leaders the death sentence for the atrocities they commit. Um, Now, I'm not a supporter of the death sentence, but I do support fully dissolving or liquidating the assets of these type of people and having them start from zero, as well as having them pay, uh, use all those assets to pay back the community that they've hurt. All right. Uh, so that's it for this article. Let's move along. Self-control. No chocolate till I'm done, at least. All right. So the article title is as follows: California Prop 6 would give prisoners the right to refuse work without retaliation. Article by Sebastian Puerta and Lisa Eugene, October 7th, 2024. Californians escaping devastating wildfires confront a grim irony, seeing their 21st century homes and livelihoods being defended by slaves. Firefighting firefighting prisoners. Man, I'm so annoyed when I make an error reading. Let me start this over. Californians escaping devastating wildfires confront a grim irony, seeing the 21st century homes and livelihoods being defended by slaves, firefighting prisoners forced by the state to fight fires under life-threatening conditions for any hours demanded. They don't have the core human dignity to legally reject the work without retaliation. Surprise turns to outrage when people learn that in, quote, progressive, end quote, California, those whose incarceration rate, excuse me, surprise turns to outrage when people learn that in, quote, progressive, end quote, California, whose incarceration rate of 494 inmates per 100,000 people far exceeds many nations the U.S. calls, quote, authoritarian, end quote. Inmate firefighters are just the surface of a massive system of forced labor. California's Prop 6, a referendum on an amendment to the state constitution, aims to dismantle this injustice. Led by the formerly incarcerated like Paul Briley, would amend the California Constitution's forced labor clause, giving prisoners the right to refuse work without retaliation by prison or jail officials. Today, inmates, largely black, brown, and indigenous, work in menial jobs, cleaning, building, maintenance, food processing, for as little as 8 cents an hour, sometimes for no wages at all. Even after weeks of work, they can barely afford basic necessities like soap. State prisons and jails, sometimes in collaboration with corporations like Home Depot, Walmart, and McDonald's, benefit from this exploitation to the tune of $11 billion annually. Let me repeat that. State prisons and jails, sometimes in collaboration with corporations like Home Depot, Walmart, and McDonald's, benefit from this exploitation to the tune of $11 billion annually. Former prisoners have exposed how correctional officers coerce them into this labor with threats of a, quote, 115, end quote, disciplinary write-up, a, quote, modern day whip, end quote, as Briley explained in an interview with Liberation, that could jeopardize their parole prospects or extend their sentences. The brutality of this system is amplified by California's restitution debt practices. The state takes 55% of prisoners' already meager wages if they owe restitution. The interest of this debt often balloons, leaving prisoners worse off despite years of garnished wages. Briley compared this to the exploitative sharecropping system that indebted Black people in the post-Civil War South. Quote, my friend owed $5,000 restitution when he was sentenced. Now, after 12 years working while incarcerated, he owes like $10,000, end quote. California, the fifth largest economy in the world, is home to thousands of unhoused people who sleep rough on Skid Row, Los Angeles. Excuse me, let me start this. I'm getting so annoyed with myself today. California, the fifth largest economy in the world, is home to thousands of unhoused people who sleep rough on Skid Row, Los Angeles, and under the freeways crisscrossing the San Francisco Bay Area. Policies shaped by billionaires, landlords, and developers ensure that affordable housing remains scarce, while the poor are pushed into informal economies to survive. Many of these poor people are then funneled into jails and prisons. Once behind bars, prisoners' wages are so low compared to their survival cash needs that Briley noted an incarcerated friend called work assignments paying 35 cents an hour, quote, salary jobs, end quote. Free world workers in California understand that this exploitation also threatens their own labor conditions. Prisoners are prohibited from organizing into unions, and the 14th Amendment's, quote, equal protection, end quote, clause does not apply to them. This leaves prisoners without even minimal protections under labor laws like OSHA. The existence of super-exploited workers in the prison system undermines the rate of compensation for non-prisoners in a perpetual race to the bottom. Prison activists stress that the fight against legalized slavery is about more than just wages and working conditions. It is about human dignity. Paul Briley said, quote, the Constitution itself was not meant to address people's wrongs. The legislative intent was to address certain people's rights. Prison should be about rehabilitation, not exploitation. This is not about who's wrong, it's about what's wrong, end quote. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment in essence transferred the right to own a person from the individual to the state, creating a system whose victims are often jailed, as Briley explains, quote, because society has failed to provide a solution to the problem they endure, end quote. Despite repeated outcry and repugnant working conditions, beginning more than 100 years ago and continuing to today, 16 states, including California, still permit forced labor, and every federal attempt to remove the slavery exemption from the Constitution has failed to reach the 38-state threshold necessary to amend the 13th Amendment. Previous attempts in California to adjust the state's stance on prison labor have either died as bills in the legislature or were limited to efforts to ensure prisons, CALPIA, and firms they contract with are bound by state minimum wage laws, which also failed. However, some states, such as Tennessee in 2022, have succeeded in amending their constitutions to retract the language permitting slavery for those convicted of crimes. In Nevada, a referendum in Question 4, which has language similar to Proposition 6, will also be held this November. These two referendums present a powerful opportunity to combat legal state-sponsored slavery. All progressive and revolutionary people should vote yes on Proposition 6 to support, show solidarity with, and rebuild power amongst a super-exploited segment of the working class. Feature image is of the Bureau of Land Management CC BY 2.0. All right, so let's talk about why this is allowed. This is a major flaw created by the ruling class, by politicians, by imperialists, by enterprise ghouls. They want to make it a profit, and it's literally the transition of the capitalist system from outright obvious slavery to exploitative slavery in the carceral system. Um, there's so much wrong with the prison system in the world, period. But a lot of it is due to lack of education uh, and lack of empathy and sympathy for people that we as people with our big egos want to consider ourselves higher or bigger than them, right? So we as people get emotional and say they deserve what they're getting. Um, but if we were to put ourselves in their place, uh, or try to understand that they are really constructs, they are results of a failing society, then we could be more empathetic and fight more for their rights as human beings. Don't forget that when they are using these prisoners for slave labor, they're doing it for the profit of the ruling class, not for your benefit. Um, Maybe they should pay for their own stay in their prisons. I don't know. But they should be making some sort of minimum wage for their labor. I don't feel that people should be put in prisons to do slave labor. If anything, they should be rehabilitated. They should be reformed. Uh, there's very strong studies that restorative justice is actually more productive than caging up people. Um, this is not to say that maybe some people shouldn't be held or restrained in one form or another, but not in the conditions and in the way that it is done in this modern society. Everyone deserves the dignity of a of housing, uh, safe housing, uh, not being put in cages two at a time or put in a giant cage like dormitory style where there's like hundreds of them um, sleeping uncomfortably and not safely to add. They should also have human rights to quality, healthy food and healthy health care and full rehabilitation. But this is not what this system is about. This system profits from the demise of the poor people, of the working class. It is all a for profit machine. Um, and it's unfortunate that a lot of people fall into the trap of saying, oh, well, they're prisoners and they did horrible things, so they deserve what they get. Uh, no, just like I don't support the death sentence, I don't support torture of human beings just because they did something wrong. Uh, as human beings, we should surpass our ego or fight against our ego, control our emotions, and actually come up with productive ideas of what's best to do with people that need our help, such as people that have committed crimes. How do we make an example of them that is positive to the world, such as showing that they can change, showing that they can be rehabilitated, showing humanity a better way, as opposed to just thinking that everyone deserves to be locked up in cages for committing very human mistakes, errors, or falling into very human traps or cycles that all of us could possibly fall into under the right circumstances or the wrong circumstances. Don't forget that most people are results of their environments. Uh, so we must be, as like I said, empathetic and think about not revenge that is temporarily satisfying, but creating a system that actually rehabilitates and creates long-term effects for positive outcomes, like uplifting the communities, like preventing people from committing crimes by actually educating them and give them the resources such as good mental health resources, good work resources, good housing resources. Um, yeah, you know, and that's a major thing here in America that I think uh, we all need therapy because we're all so propagandized and brainwashed that we mainly justify what our ego tells us to justify, right? As opposed to being objective and really getting down to the nitty gritty of what is best for the community and what is best for humanity. So, yeah, I do not support in general the slave labor. I don't think prisoners should have to work at all unless they want to. And if they do work, they should get paid their living wages. Um, Not 10 cents an hour. It's just a trap. It's an enslavement trap. It's like this. It's like so you're a prisoner. You do your time. You rehabilitate. You get back out to the workforce, and for the rest of your life, or for a few years, you still have to put down that you were a criminal. You did your time, right? You paid your penance, but you still have to put down that you committed crimes. So you're never forgiven. You're always stigmatized. Uh, but why do they do that? Because they do not trust in the prison rehabilitation system. There is no real rehabilitation system in the prison that will get people to become model citizens. This is just not that kind of a system, unfortunately, but we must always fight against it. So, any prop that gives people incarcerated more rights, I'm for. Give them the right to not have to work, give them the right to have living wages, and they should not be working for the profit of multi-billionaire companies. That is disgustingly ghoulish. Okay, so we will move on from this article. Let me check the stream as well. Audio check 1 2 2 1 2. And I will give. Let me check what time I need to head on out today. Give me a second. This is at 2 p.m. It's 1:30. So yeah, I have about 15 minutes to get ready and get going. All right, let's get this article done. Article title: Why is the U.S. government targeting African Stream? By Jasper Sa, October 9th, 2024. The photo is of Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the September 13 press conference. Uh, this is the guy that is fully supporting the Zionist agenda to genocide in Palestine and giving the go or total consent for Bibi to commit war crimes. This guy is a war criminal, and hopefully, if there is any justice in humanity, someday he will be paying for his crimes. All right, let me read the article as follows after I take a sip. It's been getting frosty out lately, so gotta get the lip balm out. Gotta wear the. I like wearing layers, so once in a while you'll catch me wearing this fancy robe. It feels good. All right, article reads as follows. On October 1st, Gmail joined a long list of services to ban independent Pan-Africanist media outlets African Stream from its platform. This followed a September 13 speech by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken that escalated the information war against anti-imperialist media in Africa. Blinken accused by name Kenya-based outlet African Stream of being a propaganda vehicle controlled by Russia. African Stream, which had millions of followers across social media platforms, including over 900,000 on TikTok and over 800,000 on Instagram, has since been banned from all Meta-owned platforms as well as TikTok and YouTube. Uh, so we believe in free speech, but we ban free speech we don't like. That's what TikTok, Meta, and YouTube are saying. Blinken claimed that Russia Today, quote, secretly runs the online platform African Stream across a wide range of social media platforms, end quote. Quote, now, according to the outlet's website, end quote, he continued, quote, Africa Stream is, and I quote, a pan-African digital media organization based exclusively on social media platforms focused on giving a voice to all Africans both at home and abroad. In reality, the only voice it gives is to Kremlin propagandists, end quote. So the propagandist is telling us that the propagandist streams are attacking us. That's pretty much what Blinken is saying. The U.S. government has, however, not provided verifiable evidence of these claims, and they're saying it without any evidence. But there's plenty of evidence. The U.S. does full-blown propaganda around the world 24/7. Foreign agents, a tired refrain. The State Department statement situates the attack on African Stream among similar attacks on a variety of independent and anti-imperialist media outlets all over the world. The September 13 briefing also included attacks on Red Media, claiming that the outlet was responsible for organizing pro-Palestine protests in Germany. In the last year in particular, countless independent outlets, journalists, and activists have seen their access to key information platforms restricted, banned, or and otherwise hindered. Uh, no, the world is pro-Palestine, period. You don't need red to propagandize you into being a decent human being. These tactics themselves aren't new. There is a long history in the United States of racist, anti-communist witch hunts, with major legacy medias like New York Times at the forefront of their inquisitions. Since 2016, and the thoroughly debunked, quote, Russia Gate, end quote, conspiracy theory, any even unsubstantiated ties with so-called, quote, Russian state media, end quote, has been used as a cudgel to silence voices and outlets crucial of U.S. policy. More recently, the focus of U.S. information war efforts has shifted to China, reviving the accusation that journalists and activists are actually secretly, quote, foreign agents, end quote, of a hostile power. The Foreign Agents Registration Act has been deployed as a legal tool to restrict the operations of certain media companies within the United States historically, and especially since 2017 when Russia Today, CCTV, Sputnik, and others were forced to register as foreign agents, a designation not forced upon, for example, AIPAC or Gulf state-funded think tanks. As the U.S. presidential election approaches, the ground is being laid for a second, quote, Russiagate, end quote, or perhaps a, quote, Chinagate, end quote, depending on the outcome in November. Earlier this year, Rossiya Segodnya, the parent company of Russia Today, was hit with additional U.S. sanctions. Two RT employees were indicted last month under FARA, which continues this chilling trend. These legal actions are setting a precedent that can and will be extended to all types of media critical of U.S. government anywhere in the world. Tech monopolies extend U.S. power. What is most troubling about these attacks on African Stream is that it represents an expansion of U.S. information war and an extraterritorial powers wielded by U.S.-based tech monopolies. The dictatorial control that tech capitalists hold over the flow of information worldwide is enabled by the monopoly power of these corporations. There are very few, if any, viable alternatives for mass communication in the 21st century, but from Twitter to YouTube to Meta's suite of platforms, the information network and communication channels that, excuse me, there are very few, if any, viable alternatives for mass communications in the 21st century. But from Twitter to YouTube's to Meta's suite of platforms, the information networks and communications channels that billions of people rely on the world over can be shut down, silenced, or blocked on the whim of a handful of ultra-wealthy Americans. What this functionally means is that the US government is able to enforce an information war entirely outside its own legal jurisdiction. Why should a media outlet based in Kenya, like African Stream, be subject to restrictions based on US laws, US sanctions, and US political goals? Why should 1.5 billion Africans across the continent have their access to information restricted on the whim of State Department apparatchiks in Washington? Beyond bans from social media platforms and other digital services, Wikipedia has now been weaponized in this smear campaign against African Stream. As of October 1st, the first sentence of the outlet's Wikipedia article reads, quote, African Stream is an online media outlet that is described as a front for Russian disinformation operations, though it presents itself as a pan-African digital media platform covering affairs concerning Africans at home and in diaspora, end quote. Wikipedia has been an information battleground for years. The encyclopedia is edited by thousands of volunteers. However, this simply provides cover for any actor which the resources to hire staff to do so to exert narrative control, from the far right to the Democratic Party establishment to actual intelligence agencies. Wikipedia is the first source of reference information for hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people around the world. One utility of speeches like Blinken's on September 13th, as well as the smear campaign that preceded Blinken's speech across mainstream media over the course of the summer, provides, quote, citations, end quote, that give an air of credibility to further reporting, or in this case, for Wikipedia editors, which can cite them as evidence without actually having real evidence. He said, she said evidence. Africa in the crosshairs. There is more to the targeting of African Stream than simply the renewed Cold War against Russia and China. Africa is rapidly growing in terms of population, economics, and global influences. Historically, U.S. imperialism has sought to crush any semblance of a pan-Africanist movement that could unite and develop the continent on. Since the 1990s, in the era of unipolar U.S. hegemony, pan-Africanist and anti-imperialist media was largely ignored by imperialist forces as inconsequential. This new wave of attacks on all fronts against such independent, socialist-oriented media demonstrates the threat that people's movements pose to imperialism in the 21st century. In an article in the Black Agenda Report, Nigerian journalist and founder of West Africa Weekly, David Hondiyan, states that this attack means, quote, we are doing something right, end quote. Quote, the work that Africa Stream, quote, the work that African Stream and others in the independent pan-Africanist media space are doing, end quote. Hundayan continued, quote, is having a real effect in cutting through decades of foreign propaganda and raising the independent consciousness of the new generation of internet-savvy young Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, end quote. Yeah, it's an information war where the propagandists are pointing at other people, calling them propagandists. Uh, it's very easy. If you're telling the truth, supported by facts, it's not propaganda, it's knowledge. If you are manipulating people with words, with emotions, not based on factual evidence, you are a propagandist, which is what most of Western media does. Propagandize people, manipulate what he said, she said, heresy, total misinformation campaigns. This also is what happens during the elections, where both parties try to make their nominees look as total patriot humanitarians of the working class when we all know that they're not, and by their records that are omitted by these propagandist news channels. All right, that is it for today, I believe. Let me refresh this and see if anything. We read that. Blinken, read that. Hurricane disaster relief, read that. On the ground at cloud of shade balls, read that. Peace out statement will stay in the streets until Palestine. Yep, read that. All right, all is good. All is caught up here. Um, yeah, just always want to emphasize that being a being a leftist goes beyond just fighting for what's good for you and your crew. It is about being a humanitarian around the world, being egalitarian. As leftists, we have to utilize tools for our mental health, tools for physical health uh, that will better humanity. Uh, we don't always depend on seeing the fruits of our labor, uh, but just on being good people because uh, it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to be a humanitarian, or from leftist stoic views, using the four pillars uh, to live by uh, a lifestyle of wisdom, knowledge, temperance, courage, and justice, which you want to apply to your everyday life and everything that you do. Uh, we have to try to stay in control and be humble and really study uh, and not only preach but practice what we preach. Um, yeah. So don't forget, all of humanity is your family. Uh, always strive for the best outcome, long term, not short term. Cool. Everybody have a